All of us are always rationalizing about the need for biodiversity conservation. But to me, it means something which is very close to my heart. It is something that I love. That to go into a wilderness and look at the forest, look at wildlife, and see that it is there is perhaps one of my greatest joys in life. And whereas there are very good scientific reasons for supporting biodiversity conservation, I think the most important thing is how one feels about it and what one feels about it. And there has to be this feeling of value just because biodiversity is so beautiful.
What was it that started this love affair?
I think it goes back to my very early childhood, where my parents loved nature, and every Sunday we would drive out just 10 kilometers out of Pune, which was really wilderness in those days. Today it's a terrible urban city. But just 10 kilometers away you could see some wildlife and bird life. It was still natural environments to watch. And I think that is what really triggered off what began to happen. Then I had various individuals who came very powerfully into my life, in fact, at a very early stage. One of them being Dr. Salim Ali, who was India's greatest conservationist and ornithologist. And he used to take me out on his motorcycle, a very big German motorcycle in those days, for rides. And while he was studying bayas, which is weaver birds, I would be fooling around in the local fields around there. And the fun of it was going out on the motorcycle, where I didn't realize what I picked up in the process. Was an enormous enjoyment of nature. My wildlife photography has covered now more than 70 national parks and wildlife sanctuaries in India, very, very diverse lands. In the earlier days, you could always walk around in some of these sanctuaries. Today, it means you have to be in a jeep. But in the early days, it has been a very, very exciting experience. I've had a Himalayan black bear charge me in Dachigam. It's a very scary experience. There's something about elephants in me. I love elephants, but they always seem to want to chase me. And I've had several times where I've had to run. And you can't imagine how fast you can run once an elephant is chasing you behind. And you look back and you see this elephant come with his huge strides. And then you realize that his big strides cover a much vaster distance than you can cover in your small strides. And it's happened to me several times. But every time it has been some sort of a false charge. I think they just enjoy chasing me. At some point in time, when I began to increasingly do wildlife photography, I realized that this was a very powerful tool to talk to other people about the wilderness they couldn't experience for themselves. And I used this in a huge number of community groups, Lions clubs, Rotaries, schools, colleges, to begin a sort of a program where they would themselves get involved with nature. I believe that's where this whole process began and grew. And gradually I began to realize more and more that it was the need for a mass conservation movement in this country which can only save our environment. What we would really require then is a public awareness movement that sets up a green government that wants to actually protect biological diversity. Until that happens, and we have a large public awareness concern for biodiversity, we cannot expect governments to respond by actually implementing biodiversity conservation strongly. I think this is one of the major issues that we need to bring about in this country in the near future. If we are able to do this, we will have biodiversity conservation happening. Our traditions are there. We are backed by religious sentiment. But we need to understand how to bring this into the top level government agenda. There are many problems that we see in terms of bringing about conservation of biodiversity in India. And perhaps one of the biggest is the conflict between preserving biodiversity in protected areas and the rights of local people, the traditional rights of local people. Because in the majority of our sanctuaries and the national parks, we have people living within and on their peripheries. How do we solve this issue? Nobody wants a tiger in its backyard. and nobody wants an elephant to damage his croplands. And this becomes a major concern for us. We shouldn't be asking local people to pay the price of conservation. This becomes a major equity issue. We are today having protected areas, national parks and sanctuaries, and the person who actually is paying the price of that conservation is a local person who lives in or around that sanctuary, because we are limiting his resource use. We are limiting his livelihood by having that national park or sanctuary. It's a national asset, it's a global asset, but are we to have this at the cost of local people, the poorest of the poor in our country?